Kia ora and g'day, I'm Alister Christie and welcome to my presentation on being more productive in the Delphi IDE. We're going to cover a number of topics from my book Code Faster in Delphi, details of which you can find on my website learndelphi.tv. One of the biggest improvements you can make to your productivity in Delphi is not related to Delphi at all. It's how fast you can type. As a programmer, you are going to do a lot of typing, and even a small improvement in your typing speed can drastically boost how quickly you can code. So we're going to start with a short introduction to touch typing. This skill has served me well for the last few decades and hopefully will for you in the coming decades. We will then look at keyboard shortcuts, code templates, language features, and much more. But let's start with a bit of typing. So we have here my keyboard, and on pretty much every single keyboard, you'll notice there are two little bumps on the F and J key. This is where your index fingers sit, and your other fingers will sit on the keys beside it. So A, S, D, F, J, K, L, semicolon. Now, your fingers have different responsibilities for keys, so you don't just use a random finger to type a key. For instance, my, say, right index finger is responsible for these keys here. So 7, U, J, M, N, H, Y, and 6. And my right pointer, or right middle finger, would do this 8, I, J, and comma. So the index finger is, greater responsibility than the middle finger, but the pinkies are sort of the worst off. They have lots of keys to take responsibility for. So my right pinky, right little finger, has to do sort of all of these keys through here. Often sort of shift and control, alt I might hit with another finger. But certainly the carriage return and all the sort of apostrophe for doing strings and square brackets and what have you. So probably the hardest working finger is the right pinky, but not necessarily in terms of frequency. So that's kind of where your fingers sit and how to reach the keys. Thumb, obviously the space bar. Definitely you want to be able to do things like hit the control key without looking at the keyboard. That'll allow you to press, do copy and paste and what have you without looking down at all, which is very handy. So we're now going to take a look at a few websites. The first is going to be typingtest.com. And this is quite an easy one to remember. I often use it, or have used it in the past, to try out keyboards if I was looking to buy a keyboard or a laptop or something like that. That's a good way of just testing out the keyboard to see how it feels. And it gives you a rough idea of how fast you can type on it. So if I go start test, it gives you some standard text. The text changes every time. So let's have a look. So a bit of commentary. My typing skills are reasonable. You can see me make a few mistakes and correct them, which eats into my typing speed. Better to not make mistakes at all. Look, no hands. About 40 words per minute is average, 70 is good, and if you can do over 100, then I bow down to your superior typing skills. You can see my fingers hovering around the home keys whenever they're not actively hunting out a key, but when you start out, your fingers will move individually and return to their respective home key. As you get better, multiple fingers will be seeking out keys simultaneously. And here we get my typing results. So I've got one typo in there, so 63 words a minute, which is okay. It's not spectacular, but if you can get above 100, that's going pretty good. I don't think I'll ever practice hard enough to get to that level. But anyway, and so here's a graph of my previous values. We can also have a look at keybr.com, which is I've seen it recommended quite often. But the frustrating thing about it is it generates these non-real words. So futurating or something, I don't know. But anyway, there's a whole bunch of words that don't actually exist, and I find it very hard to type them. So your choice of keyboard matters. I'm using a mechanical keyboard, which has physical switches for each key. A mechanical keyboard is much nicer to type on than the typical squishy membrane keyboard that is provided for you in corporate environments. You'll also notice that my keyboard has independently controlled RGB LEDs under each key. This is very important. And if, like my wife, you need to ask why, it just is okay. And I really did a bit of argument for this. And so on. And then you can have a look at your profile and it will tell you all sorts of interesting statistics. So I've practiced for an hour and 46 minutes in total and sort of 13 minutes today. And my average speed is 61.4. So, and sort of frequency of errors and so forth. So this is as time goes on, and we can see that, yeah, I need to speed up certain keys. And we can look at, come down here, and we can see that the hit-miss ratio, we can see that Z is pretty bad. Strangely, J is pretty bad because it's right under one of my fingers, and Q and so on. And you get lots of interesting stuff. Monkey type, also quite nice. We could do a Google search for the best typing websites, and it'll give you the monkey type and so on. Kiva, testtype.io, but where I'm going to go to is typing.io. Let's go back to the home page, and we can pick some code. I don't know Scala. There doesn't do Delphi listed. And so on. And this is, of course, you probably saw me typing quite a bit slower because of all the interesting characters and sort of non-English type words that you actually have to read each character rather than just kind of think about the word and typing, which is kind of the stage you want to get to. Rather than thinking about individual characters and typing individual characters, you just think about the word and it kind of magically gets typed. So that's probably all I need to say about touch typing. You want to, if you need to, put something over the keyboard with your hands underneath it to prevent you from actually looking at the keyboard. That makes it a lot more challenging. And yeah, there's lots of other things you can do, but just kind of practice lots and focus on not looking at the keyboard and using all your fingers rather than just sort of hunting and pecking, which is horribly slow. So let's move on to keyboard shortcuts. Knowing the keyboard shortcuts available to you in Delphi is going to significantly boost how quickly you can make changes within the IDE. There are a vast number of these, of which most are mentioned in my book, but I'm going to show you a few as I write some highly contrived code. Let's take a look. Let's do some shortcuts in the IDE. First one, Control-Alt-P to go to the tool palette, and we'll throw a button on, and we'll create an on-click event for that by double-clicking on it. And I'm just going to set the caption. Now, Control Space invokes code insight or sort of code completion, and you'll use that all the time. It happens automatically when you press certain characters, such as a dot, and we'll select caption is assigned time to stir now. Oops. And so that was fairly easy. Maybe we want to use sender instead. So Control C and Control V, you should be fully familiar with copy, paste, cut, and you should be able to do them without looking at the keyboard. It's very handy. Now, oops, sender as T button, but we need brackets around that. So I'm just going to highlight that. I was pressing Control Shift left arrow, and that holding down the Shift obviously highlights text, and Control arrow is move one word at a time. Now, I could have just typed a bracket at the end and a bracket at the beginning, but if I highlight it and press a bracket, it will add brackets to the beginning and end, and it works with all the sort of the 3 different brackets. So I could do curly bracket, for instance. A good way of commenting out code. Oops, that one. Anyhow, so that's the surround feature using the highlighted text and pressing a bracket. Let's create a procedure. So let's delete that line. So I have created a procedure. I'm going to press Control Shift C, and that will do class completion, and it will define our implementation section. So it works both ways. So if I created a procedure to date and press Control Shift C, it creates that, and by default it throws it in the private section. Control Y, delete line. And on that topic, we can do Control Shift Y, which is delete to end of line, and Control T, which is delete to end of word. And if I go Control Backspace, that's delete word. And it does it. It's delete to beginning of word, I guess, would be a good description of how it works. Anyhow, back to our set button caption. So we have B, and we want to basically do that. Now I could do Control X, or I could just drag it. And that has the advantage of the fact it doesn't affect the clipboard. So if you have something in the clipboard already that you don't want to overwrite, then that's a good way of doing that. And I could do the similar thing like to that. Or I could Control C, Control V for copy and paste. So we did code completion earlier, which is Control Space. There's also parameter insight, which is Control Shift Space. And that's just a button. Insert date time is a bit more interesting because we have overloads. We've got 2 here, including a format settings option as well. Now, on the topic of the code completion, this is actually a resizable window. So you can make it bigger or smaller to suit. I quite like it quite large. I think by default it's a bit smaller than that. But there's plenty of screen area, so I like to take advantage of it. So if we go back to the topic of commenting, we already looked at highlighting text, and we can just press the bracket, although it does do funny things with the word wrap. But you can also press Control/, and that will comment anything that is selected, or you can just do it for a single line. And when you do it, it also advances to the next line. So if I want to do all 4 lines, I just press it 4 times. And of course, Control Z, undo. Control Shift Z is redo. So that's used that quite frequently when I'm holding down Control Z to undo a whole heap of stuff and I go a little bit too far. So then you can do Control Shift Z, and that will redo that bit. So let's do a quick talk about indentation. So if you highlight some code, you can press Tab and it will indent all of it, and Shift Tab to unindent. If you're running an old version of Delphi, and must be that tab option's been there for quite some time, but historically it was Control Shift I and Control Shift U for indent and unindent. Now, another thing I like to do is the control click. So if I click on that, it'll take me to here. Click on date time distro. We're now in the sysutils unit, and time distro, and we're now getting quite involved in things. You can use this back button to navigate back, but much better is to hold down the Alt key and press the left arrow to navigate back to where you last navigated from. And you can do that in both directions. So It's kind of like a backwards and forwards in the browser, which is why there are these buttons. There are, of course, a great many more keyboard shortcuts available in Delphi, and I've listed most of them in my book. I would like to think all, but there's probably some very obscure ones that I've managed to miss. And I do have quite a few esoteric ones that I actually never use myself, but they're good to be aware of. There might be a case where they might come in useful one day. So let's move on to the next topic and some other areas where you can become faster in Delphi. If you have standard bits of code that you write regularly, then code templates could be a way of producing this code programmatically. Code templates can happen automatically, so you may be using them without even knowing that you are doing so. We are going to have a quick look at how they work and how they can be customized. So we are going to look at code templates next, and if you go to the View menu, Tool Windows, Templates, we'll see we've got templates. Now, there's none for forms, but if we come down to code, there is lots. Now, if I just create a new unit, type class F and then Control J, which is invoke class or invoke template completion, and my class is fine. We'll descend from TObject, and that's defined the definition of a class, very basically. If I go prop.js, which is a property with a getter and setter, call it test. It's a string, and we've defined a public property with a getter and setter. So that's very little typing that I've done, but I've created quite a bit of code. Now, this is very handy, and there are lots and lots of code templates. I'm not going to go through any of them, but for example, go try E, and we've got a try except I've indented that incorrectly. It's better, and so on. There's lots and lots, but what we're going to do is we're going to write our own. So let's come back to here. And we can go new template. And we're going to give it a name, which I'm going to call fan. And I'm going to make the invoke automatic rather than manual. So I won't have to press Control J. I'll just have to go press space, and it will automatically create this. I'll execute this template. And description, call it free and nil. So we're going to have it write free and nil effectively. And I'm just consulting my cheat sheet here. And in our code, we want Delphi as a language, context, method body. And I don't know if the delimiter is actually required, but we'll put it in. And then we're going to have, in fact, let's put this on a new line. Oops. Like so. So we have this bit of code here, variable, and that is a point. And we need to create a new point. So to cope with that, so if I just go create a point, the point name is variable. The text can be variable, and the point hint variable to be freed. And I think that's everything. Oops. Spell my name correctly. Okay. So, and then we can save that. Call it freeandnull.xml. And then when we come back to here, we'll see we have got fan, which is our free and null. So if I just go in here and type fan space, and it creates a expands that shortcode for us, and we can something like that, or something equally evil for making our application do unexpected things. So that's code templates, and they can be very powerful. And as you can see, there are quite a few defined already. And yes, you can write your own. And this, I haven't really, this is one I do free and nil occasionally, and that's quite handy. But I've not done anything substantial in the code templates. But there's lots there you can experiment with. And there is some documentation online. So that's code templates. The next thing we're going to look at is multi-paste. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go into the tool palette and throw an empty query on there and a button. Now, in our button code, we want to put some SQL into that query. Now, I have here some SQL I've copied and pasted from the internet randomly, and we want to throw all of that into a query. And so effectively we want to go empty query one dot add, and then that string, and then close it off like that. And so I could take this and start pasting, and then take that bit and paste on the end like so. And if we notice, we've got an error here because we've got some quotes here, which I need to go like that, escape them, and so on. So that's not so bad. It will take me a while. But if this happened to be a 1,000-line query or something like horrendous like that, in fact, leave that. For now. Now, the other thing you might say, let's do a macro, because macros are much more efficient. And I'm just going to copy that to the clipboard, and we can record a macro. So I can go space, tab, and it didn't quite do what I wanted, but anyway, home, down arrow, and stop recording. And then we just play back until we've got our 50 lines done. So not so bad, but we've still got an error here where we need to escape that query, and I've indented it incorrectly, which is not a problem. There's a number of ways I can unindent, but that's probably the easiest. But maybe that's not what we want, so let's go and delete that and paste that back. And what we want to do, I don't want to paste it at all. What I want to do is go into edit and go multi-paste. And so here's the text that's going to be pasted in. And we want to add fqquery.sql.add to the beginning of each line, and after each line, we want to close the quote and add a semicolon. We've got escape quotes enabled, and so 1 apostrophe goes to 2, and the trim clipboard contents, so there's just nothing extra at the beginning or end. So go OK and paste that in, and I forgot the 1, which is not a problem because I just go undo and multi-paste and go F2 query 1, and I don't have to go back and change all of those individually. So that's multi-paste. It is very handy for doing pasting in things like SQL, or some strings you want to embed in a string list or something like that. So I really like multi-paste. I don't use it very often, but when I do use it, it saves me a lot of time. So I hope that you'll be taking advantage of it from now on. The form designer is another area of Delphi which has many productivity hacks. A few simple tricks can save you a considerable amount of time in adjusting your form layout. We can play around with the VCL form designer, but many of these hints will work just fine in FireMonkey. There are many shortcuts in designing forms. I hope the few that I'm about to demonstrate will help you. Let's throw a button on, and there is a quick edit property on here, and I can call this, let's go align left layout, align of margins 30, 30, 30, something like that. I can do the same with an edit. And if I right click, we can change the justification, so we don't have to go and hunt for the alignment property. We can just change it from there, or I can clear the text as well, which is super handy because often I want blank edits on my form anyway. In the quick edit on this one, on a T edit, we also have a color property we can change. So we can set it to something like that. And if we wanted a whole list of buttons, if I shift click on button, we see it's highlighted, and I can draw a bunch of buttons on the form. And if we wanted to align them with this button here, for instance, what I need to do is click on that button. So it's got the black dots around it. You can see that the selection changes, and position, align, and horizontally will align the left sides, and we'll just space them equally as well to make the layout look better, although what we really wanted was equal gaps. So something to be aware of with the space equally. Let's throw a data source on and a DB edit. So if I right click on that DB edit, I can do a quick data source and set that data source 1. This is one I learned recently in a post by Michael Cantu. And throw an FTM table on. And we want to assign this to the FTM table to the data source dataset property, and I can just double click. So if you've only got one dataset on here, or control in general, you can double click and it will select the first one, and you can just keep clicking until you get the one you want. So we have an FTM table 2, and if I double click, it toggles between them. But we don't need a second one. And if we go into the fields editor, if the character we can define some fields, and I can make it active, and then I can right click and go edit dataset. And we can then add data at design time, and I could go bind visually and right click and link to new control. A string grid is good, and there is our data displayed at design time. For more random tips, I can throw a panel on, and I can right click and add control, and we can add a button, and I could repeat that. Add control button, and this add component, and we've got image list, and these are more useful in terms of the main form. And we've got this quick design form as well. If you want to do a dialogue, for instance, it's kind of a nice quick way of doing it. But let's set that align to top and this align to client. Now, if I want to move the panel underneath these buttons, that's actually quite tricky. If I try and shift it, it doesn't work. I can select the parent by pressing escape, and I can control arrows to move around, but that's pretty slow. But what I can do is I can click and hold and then press escape, and then I'll select parent, and then I can move the panel to wherever I happen to want it, nice and easily. A couple more things. We can view the form source by going view as text, and this Alt F12 used to enable that, but that doesn't work anymore at the moment. But we can go in and change things. So button 3, change that to my button 3, and Alt F12 does not work, but we can go back to view as form. And here we see button 3 is my button 3. And if I do Control C and copy that to the clipboard and come down, let's go to Notepad, new, and paste that a couple of times. 4, 5, and 6. And I could change the location, but I'll just copy that and paste. And there we have 3 buttons, almost more or less identical. And Delphi's kind enough, the IDE is kind enough to know that when we pasted in this control and it was already had a name of button 3, it automatically gave it the next available name, button 9, 10, and 11. So there is lots more that you can do in the form designer, but I need to stop somewhere. So hopefully this will give you some useful hints and tips that will make you much more productive. The layout of the Delphi IDE can affect your performance potentially considerably. If you have to move the mouse from one side of the screen to the other, say from the tool palette to object inspector, you can be wasting quite a bit of time, even just having to look from one side of the screen to the other. Or if you've got multiple monitors, you might have to look from one to another just to get a single piece of information. And this can waste a lot of time. I like to dock all my tool windows to the left side of the IDE, as this is where each line of code starts. This keeps my focus in one area of the screen. Also customizing the font and its size. I need a larger font these days, but I still want to squeeze as much code onto the screen as I possibly can. Also, a dark theme possibly can help a lot, particularly if you're in a darkened room, or customizing the colors in general. So let's take a quick look at some aspects of customizing the Delphi IDE. Now, first of all, there is this arrangement of buttons, and we can disable some. For instance, these browse buttons I don't need, I use the keyboard shortcuts, so we can get rid of that. There is also custom, which was just there, which we've gotten rid of. And what we can do is shift these all so that they are in the same line as the menu. And this means we get at least another line or two of code available in the text editor, which I like to have as much vertical space as possible. And on that note, let's compile. No, let's go view the messages, which is Shift-Alt-M. And I can never remember. And that sits down the bottom here. And it's kind of this, like on a 1080p screen, it's only using that much width. So what I like to do is if I take these and I can throw them on the right here, like so, and we'll give this a bit more room, like so. I can take that off and throw that down the bottom. Let's try that again. Imagine the bottom, the bottom between the two, like so. That took me a while. Now, this is a bit cramped at 1080p, but on a 4K screen, that's plenty of room. And it also leaves a huge amount of space on the right here, which I can, dock another window for the multi-device preview as a nice one to have available there. Now, if I restart Delphi, it'll lose this layout, so we want to save it. So we can save desktop, and I'm just going to call it more code, just what I generally call this layout. And what we can do is set desktop the default desktop, and at the moment it's default layout, but if we set it to more code, when I restart the IDE or create a new project, it'll have this layout. Another thing that I like to customize, which I don't actually need to do anymore, is in properties, in the editor display, is change the font to Consolis. Now, normally I don't usually have a font size this large. It's just for recording videos. It makes it a bit easier to watch, it's YouTube on a phone or tablet or something. But historically, the default font has been Courier New, which I do not like. And Consolis is the new default Delphi 11. And Delphi 11 also installs a whole bunch of other fonts. I'm not actually sure which ones it does, because I've had some other custom ones installed, but I'm pretty sure that's probably one, as is possibly JetBrains ones, I'm not sure. But we could go with a font like that. But I prefer Consolis. That's pretty much my favorite. So that's a quick overview of customizing the IDE. There's lots more. I mean, there's lots of other tabs and stuff that you can shuffle around. For instance, you could possibly remove the model view, the multi-device preview. Try and get that dot on the right there. Of course, it's a VCL application at the moment, so nothing to display. This is a bit cramped at 1080p, but as I say, on 4K, there's a huge amount of screen real estate, and you want to take advantage of it. The other option is you could drag these to another window, which I tend to like having the entire Delphi in one screen, all docked together, so there's nothing overlapping and getting in the way. And you can do, in this instance, I've got 3 screens, but I'm only recording the main screen. So that's a little bit of an overview of customizing IDE. I go into more detail in the book, and in fact, you can customize what buttons appear here. For instance, you could probably get rid of a whole bunch of them that you automatically, for instance, toggling between the view source and what have you, F12, and Shift F12. That's search for forms and so on. If you know those keyboard shortcuts, then you can get rid of those buttons and put in some others that might be helpful. Anyway, that's a little bit on customizing IDE. Knowing language features and the Delphi Runtime Library, or RTL, can save you a considerable amount of time and typing. There are lots of features built into Delphi, and there is no reason to reinvent them. You should take advantage of these features, both old and new, whenever you can. And in this section, we are going to look at some simple code and see how it can be modernized. So let's take a look at this little example here, where I've just got a little application that lists the files in my temp folder. So if we run that and go list files, it's worked just fine. But this is kind of an old-fashioned Pascal-y kind of way of writing code. What I'm going to do, I'm going to add IO utils to my uses, which is one of my favorite new additions. And there is on T directory, there is get files, and I can specify a path, and we'll just specify, let's grab that, but we don't want the start.star on there. We'll just do ctemp, and we need to assign that and we'll declare a variable and stock types array of string. And then okay, remember one lines add strings, and we see we can do an array of string, and we can do all of that and that. So if we run that, that works pretty good, but it's including the ctemp, which we want to get rid of, which would have been fine if we wanted to include that, like we want to do some processing on those files or something. But instead, we're going to have to iterate over them and add them to the memo manually. So a file in files, do add and add a file. And of course, we don't need the begin and end. And a file, of course, needs to be of type string. Oh, except we don't want to add a file. We want to go dot get file name a file. And we should be back to our original behavior. And this is where things can get a little bit more interesting with inline variables. For instance, we can declare files inline, and likewise a file of type string, var, and I run that. We do get our original behavior. Now, inline variables was introduced in Delphi 10.3, although they were somewhat broken because the parser didn't support them directly, and so you got errors in the structure view. So it wasn't until 10.4 that they were fixed. That was fixed and kind of a first-class language feature in the Delphi language. Now, also introduced, I'm not sure, was it in 10.3? It might have been earlier, is type inferencing, which means I can get rid of that and that, and it will still work. So these var inline variables with type inferencing will determine that this is a t-array of string, and this is a string based on the source code. So that's pretty nice. I quite like that. This is nice and concise and easy to read. And the only thing that I miss is that if I right click and go refactor, extract method is not available. So Control Shift M, which I would have just done automatically with the keyboard, and it is now broken. I think it's more than inline variables that break it, but certainly inline variables definitely cause it grief, and I very much miss that refactoring. But I do like inline variables, so I've been using them. So we'll see. There's lots of pluses of using inline variables in particular, and these are more about sort of features of my next book, Code Better in Delphi, is that the scope of a file is, of course, only relevant to this line. I can't do that because it's now out of scope. It has to be there. Oh, of course, I can't assign it within a for loop anyway. So, but so assigning a for loop variable is not allowed. But anyway, so we could say, if x, then so something like that. So, but that's not valid outside that for loop. So I quite like inline variables in that respect, in that if it's something declared within a for loop, that x is not available, or outside this beginning end. So I think that's quite brilliant. It also means that strings, for instance, so if I just declare this as a string, that is initialized to a blank string. And if it's done here, regardless of whether I go through this loop or not, this is assigned to a is assigned a blank string. In fact, this case it would be slower because it would be assigned multiple times. I'm actually not sure, but anyway. And there's lots of other things about when copying code around makes it a lot easier. I've found, and sometimes if you're changing types, you don't have to change your code. So inline variables, I like. Jury is still out whether they are a good idea or not, but I'm using them, and it's worth possibly you giving them a try as well if you haven't already. Certainly, if you don't have to support older versions of Delphi, it's a pretty good feature. Of course, there's a huge amount more in the RTL than just system.io utils. I go into a bit more in the book, and a few more language features, generics and anonymous methods and anonymous threads and things like that are all quite handy and reduce the amount of code you have to type. But that's probably all I've got time for this video. Thanks for watching to the end of my presentation on being more productive in the Delphi IDE. If you've read my book, Code Faster in Delphi, you'll be familiar with some of the examples I've shown today, and also know that I've covered only a tiny fraction of the contents of the book. Please do purchase a copy, as it helps cover my time in producing content like this. I'm Alister Christie from LearnDelphi.tv, and I hope to see you in another exciting episode coming to a screen near you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alister, for all the great content. And as a few people pointed out, there is more videos and books on your website, so people can go check those out there for sure.
Indeed. And I don't know if you've already explained to people, what's the deal with the getting a copy through the
I'm not actually, let me check. I'm not sure. I think if you attend 3 sessions, you get the book for free, but I need to double check that. So most likely everybody's going to get a free copy of the book, but if not, attend more sessions.
Yeah, and it's certainly recommended to get as much education as possible. And certainly, the more you learn, the less effort things become.
Yes.
So yeah. So you should be hopefully getting a copy of the ebook, everyone. And you can of course buy a printed copy, such as that one from Amazon. And you can find out more about that from my website, LearnDelphi.tv.
I am a big fan of having the ebook and the physical copy because I love being able to search the ebook, but physical copy is just such a great thing to be able to flip through and read. And as much as I'm a fan of ebooks, they really are, physical books just really are that much better.
Indeed. And if you have the ebook, you just throw it on Google Drive or something like that, and then you can access it from anywhere. You're not, whereas a physical book, if you have it at home or at work, you end up being in the wrong place. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. So Patrick says like multi-paste every time I show. Or like the multi-paste every time I show this presentation, but still never use it because I forget it exists when I should use it. That's a really good point, is I find a lot of times I get so into the way I do things, I forget a lot of the stuff that you show me.
Yeah.
Do you have any good advice on how to deal with that?
I think, as you get older, you get more set in your ways. I think that's certainly a thing that you need to be quite cognizant of, and make a real effort to, try out new things. I think quite often, like learning keyboard shortcuts, you might not remember it, so you go up to the up to the edit menu and down to whatever, and you'll often have the shortcut code listed there. So at which point, cancel your mousing and use the keyboard, because the more often you use the keyboard, yeah, reaching for the mouse is such a big slowdown when coding. And there's
I learned to. Oh, go ahead.
so yeah, certainly that I should every time I go to the tool palette in the form designer, I just use the mouse all the time. And I can't get myself doing this. Control Alt P. I think the shortcut is for that. So yeah, I'm certainly not invulnerable to not taking advantage of everything.
So one thing I did when I was working in tech support years ago, back Windows 95, just it was between right Windows 95 had been out for a couple of years, I guess. So it was right before Windows 98 came out is when I was working in tech support. But they really encouraged us to learn keyboard shortcuts, because sometimes you'd have somebody call up that couldn't use their mouse for some reason or whatever. So the more you could walk people through keyboard shortcuts, that was easier to explain over the phone. And so they would have us actually just take the mouse off our desk and not use the, physically not let us use our mouse as a way to learn that. But it also reminds me of when I learned to play golf a few years back. If you ever played golf, you're like, how hard can it be? And you got a club and you hit the ball. You're like, oh, hey, it kind of worked. I kind of know what I'm doing. And then if you take golf lessons, you get worse before you get better, because you have to unlearn all these bad habits. But then once you go through that process of forcing yourself to do it the right way when you'd been doing it the wrong way all this time, then you get better eventually. And I think it's probably the same way, is that if we can force ourselves to say, yes, I know it'll be slower to look at the sheet of paper and do the keyboard shortcuts and do it all manually a few times, but with how much code we write, and to force ourselves to go through that process of learning some of these tips, I think we'll get more productive in the long run.
Yeah. So like the multi-pace, I show this. Sorry, we did that one. Shortcut. Yeah, is there a shortcut for collapsing and expanding the code sections in the IDE? Yes, there is. And I don't know off the top of my head, because it's something I generally just don't worry about. I don't like sort of hiding code, but code navigation, code folding. So yeah, Control Shift KA, expand all. So there's all these unusual keyboard shortcuts where you can press so them all at once, or you can press Control Shift K and then leave the Control Shift held down and press U, that expand current. But there's a whole bunch of code folding shortcuts, and I've never used them. So, but they're in the book. There's also someone asked a question, and I posted a couple of links to keyboard shortcuts on there's the DocWiki and the Delphi fandom website, and they've got quite large lists of keyboard shortcuts. But it doesn't seem to be anywhere that's completely comprehensive. And certainly I had quite a few people edit through my book. I've got about 10 people helped me edit it, and I think it was a Primage pointed out a whole bunch of extra keyboard shortcuts that I was unaware of. So it's
that happens so often that until you, what is it? It was Ward Cunningham, the guy that invented the wiki, that said the best way to get the answer on the internet is not to ask a question, or get the right answer is not to ask a question, but to provide an answer, and people will correct you.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to go out there and say, here's a list of keyboard shortcuts, and people come and say, you missed one. And you're like, thank you.
Yeah. I think I'm always learning new stuff in the Delphi IDE, and there's always new things being added. And of course, this I didn't mention it in this presentation, but in the book, there's IDE plugins such as CNPack and GExperts and Model Maker Code Explorer, and they all have a huge number of additional shortcuts for various tasks. And I
will say, install one and learn how to use it before you install two, because if you install two, they're going to conflict with each other, and that
Yeah, and both, I think both CNPAC, well certainly CNPAC, and I think GExperts allows you to disable um, the it's CNPAC is not just one big plugin; it's a whole lot of little ones which you can disable individually. So there's a few things in it that I turn off because I find annoying.
There's a question here about bookmarks across units. I'm not sure if you can do that with regular bookmarks, but I know that the is it Parnassus Navigator or Parnassus Bookmarks that does that?
Bookmarks, I think, does, yeah, the Bookmarks plugin, which I haven't seen for Delphi 11. I don't know if that's available.
So someone asked about that this morning, and I looked into it. It's not available in 11 yet, but it is coming very soon. They had some issues around the high DPI stuff where it wasn't working right, but it's coming soon.
Okay. That makes sense.
Unfortunately, David Millington both is the product manager and in charge of Parnassus Bookmarks, so he gets a little exhausted sometimes.
I would imagine so. Yeah. Yeah, both the Bookmarks plugin and the Navigator plugin are well worth installing in the IDE. So if you're running 10.4 or earlier, they're really nice in terms of being able to see the structure of your code and what have you. Although something that annoys me about the bookmarks is that it doesn't allow you to reuse them. You have to delete the old one before you can use the new one.
Doesn't allow you to what?
So if you like set a bookmark with Control-Shift-3 or something like that, and you go to set that somewhere else, it won't allow you to set that bookmark again until the old one's removed.
Yep.
And also it has the Control-Shift-B to bookmark, and that bookmarks a character position, and it forms, which is really nice because it's the bookmarks traditionally only are line by line. And so being able to do a character position is really nice, and it does it via a stack as well. So you can bookmark a whole bunch of positions in the code and then press escape, and it will navigate you back through those.
That's really useful because, yeah, I've done that a number of times. You're writing something, you're like, oh shit, I gotta look something up, and so you can bookmark that, go look it up, and then hit escape and come back and write the code. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And even if you're using control click on things to navigate, being able to use the I think it's alt back arrow and alt forward arrow to navigate backwards and forwards, similar to a browser navigation. That's extremely helpful as well.
So James is saying, I found that using a second screen when I debug, Delphi moves the debug session to the primary monitor. Is there a way to get around that?
I don't know. You might need to save your desktop, your debug desktop. So shift Delphi to the other screen, and then save your debug desktop on the new screen. But I'm not sure about that. I haven't actually tried it. I generally just have everything on the main screen, and if necessary, have the application on a second screen.
There was a feature, that's what I was thinking, save your debug desktop, but there was a feature that was introduced in 10.4, had something to do with that as well, and I don't remember the details on it.
Okay. Yeah, there's something about saving screen. I remember seeing some option about it, but I've not needed it, so it's something I've not remembered.
Yeah, it was something about that it didn't. Something about not moving the desktop screens or something. I don't remember what it was. I'm sorry. I do love the IDE search where you can do the search in the IDE to find things.
Yeah. IDE
that's one of those things that took me a while to get used to using it, but yeah, the IDE Insight, that's a huge game changer in productivity and stuff as well.
Particularly if you're navigating to some obscure setting, it's really helpful, and it's nice that it's been added to the project options and tool options as well, so you can search directly from there.
Yes, it says Thomas is saying in older versions of Delphi, I was able to remap Control W to close the current file via GExperts. In recent versions, Control W expands the selection and doesn't let it be remapped. Any tips on how to remap Control W?
You could write your own IDE plugin as one possibility. So I have
Do you get into that in your second book?
yes, in my first book, there's a thing
In your
on
first book,
disabling
okay.
the insert key. So if I've never found type over mode useful, and it's only ever caused me grief. So I've written the shortest IDE plugin I could think of was it disables this keyboard. So well, it's not even a shortcut, but it's it disables the insert key. So I've been thinking about remapping it to the menu key. So you pop up menu. There's on the next to the right control. There's often a thing that brings up the context menu, which can be quite handy if you're rather than having to right click on something, particularly in the code. You can press that and then the whatever shortcut key associated with the menu item that you want is quite good. But yeah, off the top of my head, I think there might be something in GExperts or CNPAC that allows you to remap keys. But
something else you could do. So actually, I'm glad you brought up making an IDE expert, because that's one of those things that honestly I was a little hesitant to get started with originally, and then once I did, I'm like, I'm making IDE expert for everything, because you once you unlock that little bit of thing, then you can make these little things like, I need to do this, I need to do that. And
yeah,
I had my favorite story though.
Yeah, you need some sort of very substantial pain point to
yes
to go down that track, but it's not too hard. And there's quite a bit of so third-party documentation on it. I don't think Embarcadero provide any much in the way of documentation on writing plugins, but there's there's a white paper and something else that I've got it's in the book as to where to go to look those up. But yeah, there's the I mean, yeah, if you look at the Parnassus plugins, the bookmarks and navigator, that's, the IDE plugins, and they're pretty sophisticated and powerful and changed quite a bit. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of power. And I suppose the multi-threaded debugger as well, which I've not actually tried out properly, but
yeah.
It's pretty impressive.
And actually, GExperts, if you're using, especially if you're using GExperts, it has a like a framework to simplify building IDE experts as well, so you can make your own experts in GExperts. But
yeah,
there's been so many times.
Yeah, I think in CNPAC there's a scripting plugin that allows you to respond to certain events and write Pascal script. So you don't actually have to install a plugin. You can just write a little bit of Pascal code. And I did it for something, some repetitive code tasks that I wanted to instrument a whole bunch of units with stuff at the beginning and end of each method. And so I just wrote this little plugin or little script to do it, and it worked quite well.
That's awesome. I've wanted it. There's been a number of times I've thought that would be great to have some sort of scripting thing. I didn't know CNPAC had that, so
yeah,
I'll have to go look
used
that
it
up.
a long time, but that was probably about 5 years ago or something I did that, and I haven't looked at it since. I've been meaning to investigate it a bit further, because I'm sure there's lots of clever things you can do with it.
What's your preference? I know this is getting into a religious area, but CNPAC or GExperts, which do you prefer?
I tend to use CNPAC as I mean, they have a lot of overlap, so they do a lot of things very similarly. But I think I just got used to using CNPAC, and there's a bunch of things that I found really handy in that, particularly the automatic naming of visual components and things. So you drop a component on, and it prompts you for a name, and so and it automatically prefixes it with LBL for a label or something similar like that, or whatever you customize it to be. And I find that gets me into the good habit of naming everything on a form. Otherwise, I end up with label 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on.
The question here, kind of a little bit off topic, I think maybe, but I'll throw it out here for you anyway. Walter's saying he has your book and loves it, finds it very useful, but wants to know if you have an example of variable height in list view items. Said he was using it in 10.3, but he can't get to work in 10.4 or 11.
No, sorry. Is it, well, is it, yeah, VCL or FireMonkey would be the first question. But yeah, yeah, certainly not off the top of my head. I don't have any examples in the book. I've been wondering about writing a cookbook, but Daniel TT has already, I've got his name, pronounced his name correctly, already has, it's in his 3rd edition, I think, of that. So there's
Well, it can always be another cookbook.
yeah, I think if I'm just finishing off the second book, Code Better in Delphi, so it's kind of the sequel. There was originally going to be one book, but I had the suggestion to split it up to make the well, the reasoning was to make it be more profitable, but I think I'd probably still be writing my first book if it was the case that it is a monumental task to get a book finished.
Oh yeah.
So yeah,
It's
just
very rare you make money off writing a book.
yeah, no, I
Compared
would
to your time you
the
could
money.
spend otherwise.
I have earned more than minimum wage writing writing the book, so that's pretty good. But yeah, as I would spending my time, as a salaried employee or contractor or something like that would have been far more effective in terms of earning money. But
Yeah,
much more fun writing a book.
yeah, yeah. There's a question here. It says why, and maybe this is another one we're not really sure how to answer, but why is control click and the pop-up menu right click find declarations work differently?
Um,
I think I may have noticed that. I'm not sure.
I have to have a quick look in the find. Not sure. So we got find references, find declaration. Go alt backwards. It still seems to work. I don't know. I'm
All right.
not
Well,
sure how the different.
we need to wrap up here. It's at past top of the hour. It's the end of the day, and I am exhausted.
I would
But
imagine so.
thank you so much, Alister, for all you do. The great session and your book and everything else.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for attending. I hope people got something out of the session. And I hope people enjoy the book if they qualify for getting it.
Hopefully everybody ends up qualifying. I think we'll see what
Yeah,
we can do. But 10 more sessions. Tell your friends, and we'll see what we can do to get everybody a copy.
yeah. I think in terms of like just the attending sessions like this, I made the comment in my somewhere, I think my current book, in that basically you just need to read one book a year, and you're probably doing more for professional development than half the industry. It's I
Yes.
think it's pretty sad sort of state of things. So yeah, definitely, yeah, read books, watch webinars, and a lot of lots of free content on YouTube of varying
Yeah.
quality. So yeah, just keep learning. And have
Yeah.
fun.
Speaking of reading a book, I thought I was not a very big reader, and then I saw the statistics that most, at least Americans, read less than a book a year, and I was like,
Yeah,
wow, I'm pretty prolific reader.
I'm big on audiobooks, and I go through at least one a week.
Wow.
And I used to do a lot more when I was commuting to work. So I had have an hour drive and listening at double speed. So an hour, it's all 45 minutes, half an hour. So I might spend an hour and a half each day listening to something. And there are a lot of programming books available on Audible now. Particularly, I'm working my way through Uncle Bob's books, Robert C. Martin. So I've
Ooh.
just ordered a paperback version of Clean Agile, but I'll get the Audible version of that shortly. I thought I'd read the physical book, and I just arrived today is the second edition of Refactoring by Martin Fowler. which I'd highly recommend people read. It's the I of course, I haven't read the second edition, but the first edition was very awesome. I've read it twice, cover to cover, and you sort of very much learn that refactoring is not just changing code; it's a scripted way of doing things. So there's very set processes for changing code so that things are not broken. And ideally, you have tests and things like that, which will catch any mistakes you make. But it's always good to not make the mistakes to begin with.
Yeah, I think the Pragmatic Programmer was the first audio book of a programming book I listened to, and I really loved that. The 25th anniversary it was. That was really, really good. So I'm now looking forward to other programming books. So I'll check those out.
Yeah, I'd also recommend that there's the complete programmer's career handbook or something along those lines by John Sonmez.
Yeah, that's his name. Yeah, that's a good one too.
Really good. Yeah, if you're into a career in programming, you learn a lot about sort of soft skills and things like that, about dealing with people and what have you. It's definitely an excellent book, and he's got a book called Soft Skills actually as well, which is I think is his first book. And yeah, so anyway, I should probably let people go.
I think I haven't read the soft skills book, but it seems like I saw that the second book is kind of like includes some of the soft skills in it. It's kind of a superset, but maybe not.
Yeah, it's I listened to the audio version of that from Audible, and I listened to Clean Code a few months ago, and I'll probably pick up Clean Coder next, and then is it Clean Architecture, and then Clean Agile, which is his latest one.
Fantastic. All right.
Yeah,
I will have to check those out. I haven't gone through all those audiobooks yet, so.
Yeah, it's good because you don't you be commuting or doing dishes or whatever, and still improving your skills. And they're really well written and entertaining to listen to. So as a programmer, and if you want like nonfiction, there is a couple. It's the Unicorn Project, and which is the sequel, and the first one. His name escapes me, but you could probably find it on Audible or Amazon by looking up Unicorn Project. And they're sort of fictional stories, and they're also very excellent and give you kind of an idea of both how large companies should be run and shouldn't be run sort of at the same time.
Okay. All right, fantastic. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being online. And we'll see you all later. Bye-bye.